Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. This is Kim Greenhouse. I'm delighted to have Carol Gurney with us today, the author of The Language of Animals, 7 Steps to Communicating with Animals. She is the founder of the Gurney Institute, a global center dedicated to expanding and sustaining the credibility and integrity of the animal communications industry. She is a world-renowned animal communications expert. I've long been interested in this subject. So many of us have. What is it about our animals that we need to know, that they are communicating to us that we don't know? How do we get closer to our animals? How do we pick up things we need to know that they're telling us that we don't know that they're telling us? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Carol Gurney to It's Rainmaking Time. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Kim, thanks for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
I have always known that animals communicate using telepathy and some obvious behavior, and they communicate through their very presence. And I think many of us know that and accept that, but I don't think many of us have come to accept that they really do communicate. They have their own way of talking. Talk to us about it.
You know, they do. It's a lot of people think that this is psychic work in it, and it isn't. It basically is that animals do have a language all of their own. So just like if we were learning to speak Spanish or Italian or French, they have their own language. And how they communicate to us in that language is through images. They can show us events that have meant something to them. You know, their likes or their dislikes. They may show us running in a park or playing in the snow, or maybe they don't like their nails cut or being groomed. They communicate with their feelings, so they can share their feelings with us. Images, thoughts. They can even share how they feel in their bodies physically, so they can share with us those sensations so that we're better able to help clients and eventually help the veterinarians fine-tune their diagnosis, because a lot of times people don't know what's going on with the animals. They're like, oh, I wish only if the animal could talk. And then the clients will call and say, Carol, we need help. Or the vets will call and say, we need help. We don't understand what's going on. And we listen to the animal, and the animal tells us how they feel in their body. They don't diagnose themselves. Obviously, they don't know how to do that as we don't. But they can certainly share how they feel in their body, where they're uncomfortable, the sensation, and that really helps a veterinarian fine-tune their diagnosis. So I think what's important is to know that we all did this as kids. Most of us did. You know, we may have gone to our parents and said, oh, Mommy, what the dog told me, and typically the response is, oh, my gosh, don't let anybody hear you saying that because they're going to think we're crazy over here. But we're raised in such an intellectual society that those people that did that when they were little, they began to repress that only because they were told that it wasn't real, it didn't exist. So most everybody who is sensitive to animals, they do already hear the animals. But what's happening is it happens so naturally that they don't know it's the animal talking with them. They're just going around their day thinking that that's their own thought that's coming up. And they're not stopping to say, oh, that's my, my animal talking to me, because it happens naturally. Just like breathing happens naturally, and we don't stop and say, okay, right now my body is doing this. No, it's just a natural ability. And to help the audience understand that, I was at a ranch, this was many years ago, and the person who owned the ranch was having her trainer ride her horse. And I was standing in the beginning, the entranceway of the arena, and the horse was coming around, and he looked at me, and I heard him say in a thought, I want my person to ride me, why isn't she? So I told him back quietly that I didn't know and that I would find out for him and let him know. So later on, after the trainer finished, Cheryl, who had the horse, came up, and she said to me, Carol, I don't know why I keep having my trainer ride the horse. I think I'm going to start riding him again. And I looked at her and I said, and I bet you think that's your own thought, Cheryl. And she looked at me really strange-like, and she said, well, who else is going to be? And I said, but it wasn't your thought. Your horse sent you that message. And so and she said, but I never would have known that. And because it happens naturally. She said, things like that happen to me all the time. I can walk up and down the barn aisle and know what horse might need attention, or, what horse might not be feeling well. And I said, that's because you're really sensitive. So that's kind of an example so people might understand that they're already doing it, which is the great news about this.
I know at the beginning in your articulation of what you don't do, you said it's not psychic work, but we're all now at a point where we know $50 million 20 or 25 years ago was spent at the Stanford Institute research and at the government labs to invest in remote viewing, to go back and pick up data that has happened in the past. And we know now that the world we thought was isn't. We're in a psychodynamic, highly energetic world that's multidimensional. We don't even have evidence that the past, the present, and the future are all distinct dimensions, that they're all happening. There's information coming through telling us that on the human distinction level, they're happening at different time frames, but they're happening in different dimensions possibly. So our whole notion of time, of space, of communication, there's a lot of people now that can accept that we thought we knew it all and we don't. And so there is this huge receptivity to telepathy. Isn't a part of your work tuning in to the field of telepathy between all living things?
Yes, it is, but there's a distinction between psychic work and telepathy in that, and telepathy meaning animal communication. What happens with most psychics is that, yes, they tune in, and we are all psychic because all it means is heightened awareness. How aware do we want to be? Period. We all have the ability. We all have the ability to communicate with animals, but do we want to? Do we want to become fluent, which would take practice and time and study? But what happens with the language is that psychics will also tune into, say, your future. You'll ask about a relationship. Oh, yes, it's coming in about 5 years. The person might look like this. The name's this, blah, blah, blah. But they also use other methods to get there. They may use tarot cards. They may use spirit guides to gather that information. And sometimes they are not talking directly to you as an individual. What we do with animal communication, and this is where I like to keep it, is very authentic in that there is a lot now in the field of animal communication, people now doing shamanic journeying to get the information about the animal or using spirit guides to get the information about the animals. That really is not necessary because the animal is right there. Why would you be going to other means when the animal is right there? And what happens with that, you begin to muddy the waters, especially with animal communication. People who don't have good boundaries will start projecting their own preconceived notions, their own belief systems onto the animal and to the client. And that's where it becomes muddied. And I like to keep it authentic and real and keep the integrity of the communication direct with the animals. So that's where I think the field is getting off a bit, and that's where I try to keep it, on track.
Isn't a huge part of what you're teaching for people to learn how to receive communication from animals?
Yes, and what I tell people is I encourage them to take psychic development classes. I encourage them to take classes in being aware of your own intuition. Take shamanic journeying because that all helps us listen, be aware. I mean, the more that we are aware of our own needs, what are our own physical needs? Do we listen to our bodies? Do we listen to our own emotions and feelings? Are we aware of our own spiritual needs? We all need to develop those skills so that we can then apply that ability to listen to the animals, because the animals can tell us everything about themselves. They can tell us about their past, what they've experienced, how they feel in their bodies. They can talk to us once they're in spirit form. They can talk to us right before they're leaving and tell us whether they're ready to go, whether they can leave on their own, whether they need assistance.